同志们、朋友们，大家好，欢迎来到毛主义共产党的 YouTube 频道。我是马叔，和我现在是党的主席。今天的讨论是非常重要的，但是在西方国家也有争议。那事情是新疆，希望这会很有趣。如果我的声音听起来不好，我很抱歉，我感冒了。好在我参加了测试，它不是 COVID-19。好的，我们现在开始吧。
有人教育毛主席，有人教育毛主席的革命路线。
毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！毛主席万岁！
Welcome back, everyone, to the second episode of the MCP discussion show. Today's show is on the very controversial topic of Xinjiang, and I'm Chairman Mao, and would everyone else like to introduce themselves and we can get into it?
Good day, comrades. I'm Lucas M. of the MCP, the Premier.
Thank you very much, Premier, and would you like to introduce yourself, Kendall?
Hello, I'm Party Member Kendall of the MCP, and yeah.
All right, excellent. So we're just going to read a quotation from Chairman Mao now, and then we'll get right into it. So in Chinese and then English. 既要革命，就要有一个革命的党。没有一个革命的党，没有个按照马克思列宁主义的革命理论和革命风格建立起来的革命党，就不可能领导工人阶级和广大人民群众战胜帝国主义及其走狗。And in English that is, if there is to be revolution, there must be a revolutionary party. Without a revolutionary party, without a party built on a Marxist-Leninist revolutionary theory, and in the Marxist-Leninist revolutionary style, it is impossible to lead the working class and the broad masses of people in defeating imperialism and its ruling dogs. Okay, now we will hear the Internationale and the March of the Volunteers. Xinjiang, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region is, as you probably all know, an autonomous region in northwest of China, and recently we've seen increasing amounts of bad Western press on it, and what I think is the US really now has to start upping their propaganda game against China, because China is this new number 2 competitor to the United States, which hasn't really existed since the dissolution of the USSR, and it's been able to enjoy its world domination as like the global police, a judge, jury, and executioner. But because China is growing in power, this scares America, I think. So it's this collectivist country under a firm central leadership of one party which is expanding, and it begins to fill this spot of the USSR as the challenger to the US. And it's the same reason that Chinese tech companies are being banned, because they're overtaking the West now. It's this triumph of a socialist economic model. So I think that's why we see such a surge in bad press towards China, and really working to create a bad public view of China, and as well as of Han Chinese people. And I think I wanted to do this topic today because radicalisation has especially been impacting my Muslim friends, because people read these things and take it as gospel. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about some of the slanderous propaganda we see.
Well, I do.
Yeah, go on, please
Because
go on, comrade.
here's the thing. I have a Muslim family,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
one said he said China is up here just making them disappear. They don't do nothing. They just mind their business, and China is making them disappear. He said China is a bad country, and I will probably even join a group so we can go over there and kick the Chinese out of Xinjiang. But I'm like, have you seen the pictures and the videos of straight up terrorist groups popping out of that area?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I will admit China hasn't done the best job in trying to go about debunking all of these things. It is true that they did in the beginning. They censored the terrorist attacks, but they're now open, and they're very open that it was classified. But I think this is because it's a completely different emphasis in China. They really value social harmony and cohesion. And there's already been such tension between the Han and Uyghur people. They didn't want, after these terrorist attacks, if you could see the videos, they didn't want Han people to fear or discriminate against Uyghur people, or to tarnish all the Uyghurs with the same brush, and also, or they didn't want to alienate the Uyghurs and drive them into ghettos. It'd like turn them more against the Han, and it'd make them even more susceptible to radicalisation. But to be fair, they are quite transparent. They censor attacks, but they're very open about it. Everyone knows about it, and it goes the other way as well, because they ban posts where people blame other Uyghurs as being terrorists. But at the same time, they'll ban the posts from the radicals themselves who spread hate towards Hams. So, what this has done, it avoided like a situation. You know, in America after 9/11, people were afraid of Muslims because they thought, or anyone brown really, because they thought all Muslims were terrorists. You saw all the attacks on mosques, you saw vigilante mob justice, and many Westerners failed to understand. But China does this because it's a collectivist society and it wants this social harmony, so they don't mind. China doesn't care if you're expressing an opinion or complaining about the government or highlighting problems about corruption if you do it through the proper channels, but when you interrupt the order of society, that's where there's a problem, and when it starts to affect other people. So it's not about what's good for the individual, but it's about what's good for the whole society. So it's not about my opinions, my free speech, my way or no way. They do encourage like debate and discussion, but when a decision's made, everyone has to respect it, and that's democratic centralism really. It's just a harmonious and efficient society. Diversity in discussion, but then unity in action. It can be quite hard for a Westerner to grasp that, don't you think?
Yes, it truly can, because people are encouraged so much, of course, to be very individualistic. But even in something like the way censorship is used, it's used in such a way that it finds the optimal social order. You know, they use
Yeah.
it to cover up things that would as you say, would break the order of society. So instead of a few people benefiting by being able to vent their frustrations in an unofficial channel excessively, uh, that's outweighed by the disruption that would be occurred in society, and
Oh,
therefore
absolutely.
the optimal solution, is to censor it.
Yeah.
So I have no problem with that, and because they're open with it, the insidious thing is that in the West, when it comes to censorship, it's done in a far more secretive way
Oh yeah,
because of
it's still there by all means. It's just
by all means.
people, yeah, but everyone in China knows there's censorship there, and they're actually educated on why it's done, and they respect that really. They don't really want to hear about slander, about tabloidy nonsense or fear mongering, but in the West, there's censorship all the same, but people deluded by a notion of choice, much like the two-party system actually. Sure, you can vote for either party, but neither will change the mode of production. So it's just like that. You can get your news from multiple sources, but all the outlets will be pushing the same agenda, and those that don't, like, for example, the Global Times, they're actually restricted and they're discredited as being propaganda. And they actually, like I don't know if the Global Times or the People's Daily, they had to, in the United States, they had to register as if they were a foreign embassy and all their employees as Chinese government employees. But then, nobody's questioning why they're trying to make it difficult to hear China's response. But you could just imagine, like, the uproar if China started censoring American state-sponsored media, like View on Asia or New Tang Dynasty. Everyone would be crying about censorship in China. So people don't realise that they actually are receiving censored content in the West, probably even more so than in China, in fact. But it's just that people get to pick a side, like CNN or Fox or Republican or Democrat or Labour or Conservative. They ultimately
Yes,
all toe the same line, that NATO anti-China, anti-socialist line. It's a bipartisan issue, isn't it?
exactly, and also and this is how I would describe the situation is that in China, through democratic centralism, you have popular control over the media. The people control it for their
Yes,
own
yes.
benefit collectively. But in America, you have the media dominated by a single class, which of course has its own class consciousness. As much as the proletariat, in the Marxist way, could develop its own class consciousness, I mean, the bourgeois, they own the media, they have a much more of a class consciousness than any of the proletariat does these days. And so, with
Oh
that,
yeah.
of course, whether explicitly or implicitly, they will inevitably push the same line regarding, you know, the war against socialism and communism.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, so you can either have, because they have all the money, right? You can't be some poor people and just start a media company, living in a trailer.
Oh yeah.
So you can either have popular control over the media or capitalist imperialist monopolization of the whole society.
And this illusion of choice actually serves the capitalists even more, because in China people aren't polarized and divided, um, because in the capitalist countries, having different parties, having different groups, gets the working class fighting against itself, and it just keeps workers fighting against each other and not questioning the system. Whereas in China, they're all unified, going in one direction. So having these different groups probably does serve the interests of the bourgeoisie, much like how intersectionality. If you can get white workers and black workers to fight each other, they're not uniting as workers. If you can get men and women to fight each other, they're not uniting as workers. So it just takes focus away from class.
I think
Yeah,
so, actually. I think that's been the most effective tool. But go on, comrade. Um,
yeah. It's because like it does. Because if you think about it, why was there race? Why like capitalism is like a booster for racism? Because if people didn't care about making their money on the way, but they really need someone else to do work for them, or they treat someone else rude, they don't want the workers to be united because they know if that does, that puts them in an area. And how they say censorship in China. China does it because they don't want the people to be scared 24/7 of everything they come by. Because then, if everyone's scared, that's just going to cause absolute chaos in the
And more
society.
division.
Yeah, it's going to cause more division. Like, because if you think about it, people will start you. say rude things to just these people just because they come from that area, and they won't even get to know these people. They'll
Hmm.
just be rude to them because they heard they're from that area where this stuff happened, and they're either related to those people. Because, like, when I went to China, I asked them about their thoughts on certain areas, and they had no problem. They said those are those few groups of people. But over here in America, they don't just like those groups of people. They just say this society and this religion. They don't say they sometimes like with corruption. They don't say corruption. They say lobbying, and it's basically the same thing as corruption.
Yeah. So I guess that was more of a preface to what we're going to be talking about, but it's just I wanted to say every article you read will have an agenda. So maybe when you read an article, you need to try and find the sources for the claims that they're going to make. Is it backed up by evidence, or is it just a lie that's been told so much that it's accepted? So I guess with all that in mind, we can look at these claims about Xinjiang. So I want to say China is actually a religiously free country, and it actually has been ever since its founding. But Muslims can go to mosque, the children study Arabic, and they're actually I think the number I think there's about 25,000 mosques in China, and something like I don't know if it's 9 or 10 Islamic universities. But when I myself went to China last year, I don't know if it's quite a famous city. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Xi'an. Um, or Xi'an, I don't know the tones, but Western Peace, and Chiang Kai-shek was actually held there. But it was a city on the end of the Silk Road, so you can imagine there's a very large Muslim community there, and it's very open. There's a Muslim quarter, if you will. You can go and have your ethnic food, or your kebabs, your Xinjiang food, and there's these large mosques with minarets and Arabic calligraphy and all these large crescents and stars, and even the other cities that I went to that weren't didn't have such a large Muslim minority, you still saw Muslims practicing very freely, and not just Muslims. You see Gothic cathedrals or parishioners of Catholic churches going to mass, or even these Protestant gathering places. I mean, I visited a Buddhist monastery too, and saw the monks praying and people going to pray to a Buddha and burn incense. So, point being, China's very religiously free, and actually, being cut off to the world in like the latter half of last century, it's actually preserved quite a lot of religious traditions that sort of went down the drain in Western countries. That's really interesting because people always think of Mao's China Cultural Revolution destroying religion, but for example, it's preserved a lot of Latin masses in China. It's it's almost the opposite of what people think there. But we still anyway, to the point, we hear all these claims of China persecuting Muslims and trying to wipe out their race and replace them with Han Chinese. So we should probably look at the claims made specifically about Xinjiang. So one of the big ones I hear a lot is China has a eugenics program. They want to wipe out the Uyghur race.
What?
Yeah. But the easiest way to, yeah, exactly. But you won't believe how much this is actually published in like the BBC. They literally call it a Holocaust. But the easiest way to combat this is the one-child policy, right? Yeah, even though we disagree with it, you can still see that China, even in the Dengist times, didn't have a policy against Uyghurs because Uyghurs were actually exempt from the one-child policy and the two-child policy, and they were actually given quotas to try and increase the amount of Uyghurs being born, increase the Uyghur birth rate. They have like 9 children.
Right.
Surely, if you wanted to eradicate Uyghurs, you'd say to the Uyghurs, you have one child, and the Han Chinese have no limit. But it was actually the Han Chinese who had a limit, and the Uyghurs who didn't. But that's been taken away now anyway. But if it was if they wanted to commit if they wanted to wipe out a race of people, why would you promote more births?
There's just a disconnect between like people. Honestly, I think it's an honest problem that the capitalists exploit. Who
Yeah,
has time in their busy lives? I mean, when your entire life is dedicated to just earning money, getting your next paycheck, so you
yeah,
can, feed yourself, your family. Who has time to actually go into research
dig
about
into
some
it. Yeah, you're
esoteric
right.
thing
Yeah,
like? I think that is another extremely potent tool of the or weapon of the capitalists.
Yeah,
They weaponize their own system. They prevent anybody. It's actually like how 1984 plays out in George Orwell book.
yeah. If people
1984,
are so, if people are so exhausted, we don't have the mental strength to go and explore all these things, or even the time
or
just
even
to do
just the
it.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, just the time. Like even if they're not exhausted, like there are so many things that we can possibly be learning. We have infinite, as we say in economics, with scarcity. Infinite things we could want, only a finite way to get them. And that's the same thing with time. We have a certain finite amount of time, and we have to decide how to optimally spend it.
so you're just going to accept what comes on in the morning news while you're eating your breakfast, basically.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah,
As the truth. Yeah.
especially when it's played every single day. It just becomes
Same.
part
Oh
of
my
reality.
God.
Oh, yeah,
Oh Lord. Yes. It's so repetitive. The Western propaganda. I
yeah.
honestly
Oh,
hate it. Whenever the TV goes on, I want to shoot myself.
When I go to my grandma's house and it's just BBC rolling around and around and around. It's like, oh man, you can just tell talking to her. It's like, how much BBC do you watch?
um, yeah, like, um, they censor it because I was watching the news one time,
Mm.
and I, I'm like, what they're saying has nothing to do with the situation. I'm like, why are they changing the situation when this person asked them a question and they can't answer it? They just completely change. And like you say, they want to oppress the people. Um, like in the if they really want to oppress the people, going back in time to the Degas era, if they were really oppressing them, not treating them right, would they really have a military march in Xinjiang, specifically only Uyghur people?
Yeah, and a lot of these you could call it what's it called, affirmative action programs that China has. It's not just true for Uyghurs, but actually for all ethnic minorities. They have these lower entry requirements into universities to get more representation. You can get in with worse grades. Um, so they're trying to encourage full participation and a complete welcome to society, but as a unified society. They're not trying to push people into the ghettos. And even in the UK, we want to believe we have integration, but you can go into a town and there's very much, there'll be an area where white people live, there'll be an area where Pakistani people live, and in China that's the big focus. They want this harmonious society. So they love Uyghur culture, but they don't want Uyghurs to shut themselves off from Han. But if China was sterilizing and aborting all these Uyghurs, it makes no sense. Why would they encourage large Uyghur families and try and let Uyghurs get better education and join in more professional jobs? Like when we try to find a genocide, you can look as hard as you can for genocide. We see this affirmative action program. So I guess this is why people have gone to this claim of cultural genocide. They're not killing the Uyghurs; they're just trying to destroy their culture. Like
It's not even cultural genocide. Like people, you know, and that's actually a far easier lie to make because they have re-education centers that
yeah,
easily, like they could be used. They could, in theory, be used for that purpose. So it has an extra layer of plausibility. So they get a slightly higher echelon of thinkers than they usually would with their typical pandering. But ultimately, that's quite the opposite of what they're doing. They're trying to improve the quality of life for the
and
Uyghurs and trying to make their culture productive and well integrated into the society,
yeah,
and have its own identity like the rest of the Chinese cultures,
and poor.
nationalities.
If you're really poor and have a terrible standard of living, you are more susceptible to be radicalized, perhaps by Wahhabis. So
Yes,
if you can get opportunity, if you can get an education, if you can get a job and join in society, you're not sectioned off, you're not pushed into a ghetto, you're not living in destitute poverty. If you can be brought up into the rest of society, you're much less likely to be radicalised. It doesn't mean they want to destroy your culture or take away your Islam. In fact, they usually, because these Wahhabi radicals, they have all these radical beliefs, but they're usually quite actually uneducated about the fundamentals of Islam. And apparently in some of these re-education camps, I don't like to use the word camps, facilities, they actually have Muslim imams, like I think Sunni imams, to teach them like the proper form of Islam, instead of a Wahhabi radical form. Because a lot of these people who believe in the radical Islam, they believe China bad, and the way to get rid of China is to blow up a car bomb on Tiananmen Square, or stab a load of people in a Kunming train station. And they don't. They've never opened the Quran. They've never prayed. They just don't like the conditions that they live in. So China's trying to show them a way out and show them what authentic Islam is, not this fake Chinese Islam. It's quite mainstream Sunni Islam. Yeah.
Exactly. It's just giving them, like, it's literally just giving them another option that's better.
Yeah.
Because, they get their needs fulfilled. They can... honestly, I do not think that constant terror attacks and terrorism is conducive to a healthy and happy Uyghur population. I'm just going to be honest there.
Yeah.
So by fixing, in every way, they're the benefactors of Uyghur people, as they are the Communist Party is the benefactor of the rest of the nationalities in the country, and always has been.
But
I mean,
if we compare the effectiveness of the program, if you think about America after 9/11, you have they start war and millions of people have died, and terrorism's not really been reduced all that much. But if you think about China in the last 5 years, it's a domestic problem. They've not gone into any other countries or blamed anyone else. But there's barely any terrorism in the region now. If you contrast that with 5-10 years ago.
Because who are they going to recruit? If everyone is eating, if nobody's left behind in society, people will get their needs.
Who's alienated? Who's alienated?
Exactly.
To recruit? Yeah. But,
exactly. Just like you wouldn't have. I mean, just like you wouldn't have Tibetans or what's it called? Mongolians committing terror attacks.
Yeah. Well, that's another good thing about that you mentioned Tibet, because so many of the claims that we see that are made about Xinjiang now, about all these forced sterilizations and abortions and injecting women to stop their period, it's actually they're almost the exact same headlines we saw about Tibet, all the free Tibet stuff we saw 60s, 70s, 80s, and they probably think it's been just long enough now that they can reuse the same headlines and people won't quite remember. But if you go to Tibet, they are actually the most fervent supporters of Chairman. So many Tibetans have a huge portrait of Chairman Mao in their house, or big hammers and sickles, because, I mean, I know the current Dalai Lama is pretty good, but Tibetan life was brutal under Dalai Lama kingdoms. It was... So Tibetans saw such a big jump in their standard of life after Tibet fully joined China in 1951.
I mean,
they are so grateful. Yeah,
they're like a small isolationist kingdom, basically. So, of course, the economic benefits, trading with, being part of this large, progressive multinational state.
But I mean, you go to what's the palace called in Lhasa? The palace that the Dalai Lama used to go in, and they had some pretty brutal way they treated, what they call criminals. Like all the spiked whips they had, and they had leather skins, but it was made of human skin, and it was shriveled up to the size of a child from an adult's feet. So it was horrifically brutal, right up until the 50s, really. But anyway, back to the point. You just got to be really, really careful when you read Western media, because they're so selective about what they show. For example, they'll show a big picture of a mosque getting torn down, and they can't I'll put this example up on the screen, the video, but they conveniently leave out details that the mosque was actually structurally insecure. And you can see the interview with the imam of that mosque specifically, and it shows the government is actually building a new, bigger mosque because it couldn't take all the people that were going there. So if it was a cultural genocide, why would the government build a new? Why would they translate all the documents, all the posters, all TV songs into Uyghur? Is every sign just placed there to distract foreigners to try and be a propaganda thing, or do you think it's actually just for the Uyghur people? If there was a bias against Islam, why would there be prayer rooms in public places? And if you go into some of the camps that have now been closed down, you can see there's even prayer rooms in these so-called camps, and they have, even in the doors in these camps, they have everything in Uyghur, in the Arabic script, and in Chinese characters on all of the doors and the signs. And you see, I've seen interviews in COVID hospitals during COVID-19. Why would the government provide people with halal meat in facilities, in hospital? They just say, eat the normal meat if they wanted to do a cultural genocide. They're actually, they're so catering towards Muslims.
If we're actually going to talk about an example of actual cultural genocide today, although it's on a very small scale, I know for a fact, like, based on, I mean, I can, maybe we can put a link somewhere or something, but, you know, people who have come from the DPRK and have gone to China, so many of them have literally been kidnapped by the NIS from South Korea. And they get taken to a legit I wouldn't call it education, that's a very kind way to put it. It's more like, it's basically a holding facility. It used to even have barbed wire around the walls, just in the middle of nowhere. They go there for 60 days, up to 60 days that is, until they agree to become spies for the DPRK, or say bad stuff about them on TV. Then they go to, like, a school. All they can find is just books about how terrible the DPRK is. And they have their passport taken as soon as the traffickers, abduct them from China.
This is literally what people think exists in China, isn't it? It's
like literally. So
it's like you guys run the same thing. If that was even what was there in China, you'd be just as guilty. Yeah, but I mean, it's no surprise really, because we've seen so much before. We've seen stories that they always turn out to be fake, but they're just something that they can be used by the US and the West to justify. Well, often we see them actually like justifying military interventions and liberations in other countries to kill millions of people. Ironically enough, mostly Muslims. Like stories about Iraqi babies being thrown out of incubators, or Syrian soldiers, or they complete with these actors of crying nurses, and it seemed if you were skeptical, if anyone in the West was skeptical of the crying nurse's testimony, you'd be considered a monster. And then if you
because
the same way, if you're skeptical of the woman crying with a hijab on about what's going on in China, you're considered as a monster. So it's really hard to counteract a testimonial.
Exactly, because it's your word against the news agencies, basically.
Yeah.
And so, people automatically think that that you're heartless, but really, if there's nothing going, it's just a human psychology. It's just not quite rational,
Yeah, but
someone's really, people get emotionally attached to this idea that this is what's going on because the media keeps telling them every day. So it becomes, what are they just, when their whole conception of reality is based on that, are they just going to change their mind just because one person is trying to argue against it? The first thing they'll feel is be disgusted, and they'll be reluctant to hear out the whole argument. It's just you know how it works. It's unfortunate.
It's just,
and then meanwhile, the U.S. can justify actual atrocities that they commit.
Just the claims that they make are just so hard to they're unfalsifiable basically. So anyone can go and stand outside with some B-roll footage of a facility and then say whatever they want about what happens inside, or you can dress anyone in a hijab up and say oh they put the electric shock to my head, but the thing is you can trace the stories of these activists, and maybe I can't remember anything specific, but I'll put a few examples on the screen. You think as time goes on you'd forget more details, not just keep remembering more and more. And people's story change. Like at first they were being injected, and then later they were being forced abortions, and after that they were sterilised. It's like, well, were you or weren't you? It's like you don't remember more as time goes. And it's like, oh, I remember this too. It's like the trauma's clearing now.
Exactly.
If you follow some of these, for some of the individuals, their stories are very, very fishy.
Well, again, another example I have from the DPRK.
Yes, please.
If you've heard of, I'm not sure, I forgot his name, but the guy who wrote Escape from Camp 14, that book, he said, oh yeah, they killed my father when I was in Camp 14. And then his father made a video saying, no, I'm quite alive, thank you. I was never in the camp. And then he literally just said, oh yeah, I just forgot, I was actually in a different camp. It wasn't Camp 14.
Oh,
So
yeah.
this whole book he wrote is just literally one giant lie.
This
So, but people believe it because what else? What other source do they have? Like, what
this
is that
this
going to be? What's
reminds me.
echoed?
Yeah, often they use like fake names of, but they're quite stupid
Oh yeah,
because
yeah.
they use names of real people. So you have a woman dressed up in a hijab or whatever, but she uses the name of a real person and says, "Oh, they took my mum into the camps." But you can go and trace that name, and the daughter and the mother. I saw an interview on CGT, and the daughter and the mother were actually still living in Xinjiang, and they went to the house and saying, we don't even know. They showed them the interview of this woman complaining about how the mother was taken away. They were saying, we don't even know these people. We've never seen them before. So you'd at least think they'd make fake name instead of using real ones. But
Well, I think this is just a symptom of the fact that the bourgeois class, because by their very nature they had to exploit. By
yeah,
their very nature, they're class opportunists. So they take any social, you know, force that they can, and they'll bend it in order to make an opportunity for them.
yeah. And you see, as far as cultural like linguistic genocide, they're not trying to stop people from speaking Uyghur, but of course they're going to teach people Mandarin in the facilities because the aim is to teach them new skill sets so they could, if they wanted to, they could go to other places in China. They could do business with other Chinese people and open
Yes,
up
yeah,
their
exactly, to
yeah,
encourage dialogue with the rest of the country. Yeah.
and that stops them from being so shut off as well. It stops them from being
Yes, and it breaks down the
radicalized.
barriers that yeah, it breaks down the barriers between
Yeah,
the different cultures because they
it's
have a way to engage positively with one another instead of being isolated with a language barrier and having to listen to some certain radical imams or something as
so
their only.
yeah, so many people who criticize these camps. I just look at how well they've done in China. I'd say to them, how would you do it then? Would you not teach them the language? Would you not try and give them employable skills? Would you not try and integrate them with the rest of the country? If you had this closed off minority who were being easily radicalized by Middle Eastern terrorist groups, what would you do yourself? And it's so often I see them saying, "Oh yeah, if we didn't like China said they were doing, then that'd be great." It's like just all the claims being made about these camps are just so baseless. I mean,
And I think
go on.
camp is a stretch too. They're I wouldn't exactly call them camps.
Yeah, camp, yeah, facilities. Like
Facilities. Yeah.
if you look into any of the articles, any of the reports, beside testimonial, there's no real source there. Like just as an example, the claim 1 million Uyghurs are locked up. It's published in every Western media article, but all the Western media, for this statistic, they quote the World Uyghur Congress, but then I might put it up on the screen, but the World Uyghur Congress doesn't have a source from Xinjiang. Instead, you can see the chairman of the World Uyghur Congress says he gets this 1 million statistic from the published articles in the Western media, the articles which supposedly get information from him. So when you trace the stories, there's no real source for anything. It's like literally
So
yellow
they go in
journalism.
circles. Yeah.
Yeah.
At the ceremony, I met Omer Kanat, chairman of the World Uyghur Congress, a group funded almost entirely by the NED.
The Chinese authorities, Chinese government put more than 1 million Uyghurs in so-called re-education camp. It is very similar to concentration camp.
How do you know it's 1 million, the number? That's a very staggering number.
Yeah, staggering number. This number was given to by some or even some Western media estimates. We don't know exactly how
Western
much,
media estimates.
So it's so hard to falsify because anyone
Because yeah,
can just
I
quote
know. I
anyone,
actually
and then you
noticed
have a
that too.
source to
They
quote.
provide.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like it's literally the definition of an echo chamber.
it is. Yeah, it's exactly an echo chamber, and then
Yeah.
If I did see one article which claimed to have a source for the million statistic, but it's even funnier, right? Because it's so dodgy. They got the statistic from eight testimonials, again testimonials, and basically each person describes how many people they knew who were supposedly put in camps. And then what they did, they extrapolated that proportion of people, the average over the 8 people, they extrapolated that percentage, which was like 10% or something, and then over the entire Xinjiang population, to say that 1 million people were locked up from 8 testimonials. That is an amazing mental
for a statistic.
Like, the mental gymnast should apply to the Olympic Games, because that is staggering. That is unbelievable mental gymnastics. That is confirmation bias to the next level.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised, but I'll have to link that one too.
That moment when your friend is obese, so therefore 50% of the population must be obese.
Exactly. Because you have one friend, 2 friends or something.
Like a study needs a high sample size to accurately approximate within
8 people.
within a reasonable probability that it's within a certain margin of error. You have to
exactly.
You have to have a big sample size, but 8 people is not 1 million.
I'm sure you could select some 8 people who could give you some very favourable proportions of people who've been locked up as well.
My goodness, I would like to say something.
Please do.
Because when you because you know how people write papers for like communists and stuff. I was reading this paper by the Communist Party of America, but a lot of the was just stuff you hear from Western propaganda, like you're a communist. Are you supposed to support other communists? They said the same thing. China has everybody locked up, while America, we don't do that. But
you see,
I'm like,
the thing is,
they're straight up revisionists.
Yeah, a lot of these Marxists or liberal Marxists or communists will say, yeah, China's bad and America's also bad, but China's still bad, right? But if by doing that, by opposing China, what China's done in all of its history is not as bad as what America does in a week. So by opposing China, all they're actually doing is actually supporting America, because all they're doing is opposing America's opponent. So even if you don't support China, necessarily the Chinese Communist Party, you'd still support them as that counterweight to America. So all they're doing by opposing China is actually strengthening the US and the US's monopoly. Like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? So even the Communist Party allied with the Kuomintang to fight off Japan. So all they're doing by trying to oppose China, it's not going to make America Marxist. All they're doing is increasing America's dominion. And if people think China's terrible, all they're going to do is increase the amount of people who support the US.
Well, for all we know, some of their leaders might be CIA agents. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised.
I really wouldn't.
If they're big enough, they probably would attract that attention.
Yeah. It's just,
Distraction, as I said, this is one of their most powerful weapons, applied in many different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I would like to say something, because I gotta go in like a minute. But I want to say this. I would actually like people to actually look at different reports from different areas and not just the West. Look at the reports from countries that are like directly connected to China that know. Like people just read these Western reports from Western companies. It's like why do this? Like, why are you just blatantly follow whatever the news says? Oh, America doesn't censor. Yeah. So, but they do more than China. So that's what I gotta say. But I gotta go. Chairman.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Comrade Kendall.
Yes, thank you very much, Comrade Kendall.
Yeah, bye.
All right, see you. Should we continue, Comrade? I was just going to message GP to see if he could come on now. I know we had a situation on his hands.
The joys of being a father, eh?
Yeah. Alright, let's just message him.
Just reading this.
Yeah.
Twice on me.
Anyway.
Okay, just cut this part out, I think.
Yeah. But let's get back to the point. Like, another example I can think of. There's a Reddit AMA who it was supposed to be from an escapee from a Xinjiang camp, and it turned out this victim she was more or less a CIA. She was part of a CIA funded media organization, and she hadn't actually been to China since she was 5. So the questions on this AMA were golden. They were just like how much, instead of being about the camps, they were like, how much does the CIA pay you for each one of these you do? Well, suffice to say she never came to the AMA, but I'll put that on the screen again in editing. So the media's just so deceptive. I even saw
the
one.
CIA would pay anyone directly, though. They would use proxies for sure.
It wasn't. No, sorry, she wasn't an agent, but it was part of. You could trace the funding of the organisation, a bit like the Hong Kong protesters.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And of course, that's the sort of thing. The only people who would actually know where the money comes from would probably be the PSM if they, MSS. Sorry.
PSM.
MSS.
Yeah.
PSM.
Yeah. There was another good one once. If I can find it again, I saw it on the r/Sino subreddit. There was a picture of illegal alcohol being destroyed. It was like illegal wine, and it stained overflow red, but you could see the boxes and the bottles of wine. But then a Uyghur activist blurred it out, so it looked like massacred dead bodies on the floor, and had censored the bodies. And then if you look at the uncensored photo next to it, you can just see it's wine bottles and wine boxes that had been destroyed. And it looked all this red stain on the ground. It looks like blood when they censor it. And they're like, it's Chinese Communist Party massacring Uyghur people. And it just destroy illegal alcohol. Oh, there's
what a
another
massacre! That was probably perfectly good wine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it probably wasn't. They've been cracking down on quite a lot of illegal alcohol, which the people in the factories making the illegal alcohol won't even know. They're making it fake. They think they're putting it in real bottles, but yeah, it's been quite a scandal. But especially in the early 2000s, they're getting a lid on it now. But China was a bit of a wild west back then. But you see another one, the pictures. They're from cramped migrant shelters in Turkey, and that works very well because Uyghur people look quite similar to Turkish people. Uyghur people are Turkic, but they're not Turkish. Turkic people and Turkish actually went to war. So you see all these activists in Turkey, they actually think Uyghur people are Turkish. They're not. These activists don't actually know their own history. But you see all the pictures from the migrant shelters, and it shows all the bad conditions. And the thing is, these shelters are in Turkey. Or you see there's another one. It was a police officer in Indonesia who was arresting a thief, and they said it was a Chinese police officer. Stop attacking someone for reading the Quran, but you could just tell from his uniform that he was not a Chinese police officer. It's just.
Oh yeah, okay.
Have you seen that example before?
Yeah,
they said.
I'm gonna admit you're probably far more tuned into the Chinese news than I am, but I did see something once again similar with the DPRK, which I probably follow a little bit more, to be honest.
Yeah.
I saw there was okay. Just don't trust pictures where they look ultra zoomed in, because they showed. Oh yeah, someone's trying to. This person was shot while escaping North Korea. It said. And literally, it was an ultra-zoomed-in picture. There was a concrete wall and a car driving by a security guard. I know that uniform. It's Vietnamese.
Oh, nice.
It was Vietnamese.
Yeah, there was one with, I think it was a PLA soldier. They said was that they were abusing him. But the thing is, this PLA soldier was wearing this uniform and a hat. The hat was out of issue since the 1980s. It was such an old PLA hat. It's just so unbelievable.
Standard issue.
Yeah, and you see on the BBC they're saying more and more camps are popping up. Well, in loads of occasions there's aerial photos, aerial pictures of warehouses that have been built, and they're branded as these new camps. But I mean, it's hard to tell from a grey boxy building with a fence around it.
Exactly.
You could say it's anything.
It's so ambiguous.
Anyone can stand outside a grey boxy building and say this is a camp. But you look on the pictures, no one. It's like no one's there. No. There's no big groups of prisoners being moved around or anything. It's quite quiet. Just like, well, it gives it away, but that lorries are going. I guess they could say people were in the lorries, but you know, anyone can stand outside a fence and say whatever they want. You just got to be so careful.
All prisoners get provided with 3 cars.
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
help get around the
Yeah,
camp to the next torture session.
Oh, the level of deceit and brainwash. I mean, it's disgusting, really, but people.
It's disgusting. It's like it seems funny to talk about it when you point out just how ridiculous it is. But the sad thing is, like, most people believe this stuff because
people have been so sold on this lie. If you just go into a normal discourse in the UK and you try and bring up the other side, you're just a brainwashed CCP shill, and the cognitive dissonance these people have, it immediately blocks out anything good about China that you could ever say. It's like they say you're brainwashed to think one-sidedly. Are you not thinking one-sidedly? Why don't you want to hear the other side? But the worst part is these people, they actually believe that they're free and they're looking at every side of a story and they're making opinions for themselves when they're basically being force-fed what to believe.
Literally force-fed, honestly. That's the thing I noticed about CNN, for example, is
they
don't tell you how to think, and American schools certainly don't do that either. The critical thinking is suffering hard in the population.
They tell you what to think, not how to think, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, they tell you what to think. Like, you get this guy, he says the same thing over and over, every day, same issue, whatever they're campaigning for that week or month or whatever. In this case, I think they're trying to use COVID as a distraction for whatever political scheming they're doing.
CCP virus. I've actually seen that on so many websites. CCP virus.
Like during the protests, for example, the huge protests that were going all over the country in Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What did I see on CNN? Oh, what was it called? What do they call it again? Like Cuomo primetime, just talking over and over every single hour of every day about COVID outbreak and what people, and just like literally grade 2 level thought behind it. Like not analyzing the situation, just talking about it over and over. And then of course after him, there's the Situation Room, and just literally like during that they just smothered it under a pile of lame repetitive stuff. Like at least communist propaganda is honest. You know what the bias is.
Yeah.
Like pretty obviously. And you know it has usually some thought, consideration behind it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, well, another one. They had these like. Oh, this is a funny one. It's sad, but it is funny. You had these so-called leaked documents that got exposed on Western news about Xinjiang. This so fake. If you read, because they tried to make them in Chinese, right, to look like official documents, but the Chinese phrasing and grammar it's super weird. Like, it's like they translated from English using Google Translate to make these documents. I mean, I'll edit it onto the screen in the video, and I'm sure our Chinese comrades will be able to have a good laugh. Good laugh looking at them. Yeah.
Oh, you talked about Comrade. Sorry, I don't know why I'm like forgetting names.
Well, Comrade Legend Joe. Yeah.
Joe, yeah.
I mean, we actually seem to have quite a lot more on the YouTube channel. We must just watch the songs or something. Never got around to joining the party. Yeah. But what it's very hard to follow anyone's anecdotes or any photos or any evidence. But the best we can do is you can follow the stories of like radicals who were previously stuck in ghettos, went into the facility, came out, and you can after half a year they came out, and you can actually see where they are now, what businesses they're in, what jobs they have. Like people have become teachers and entrepreneurs and scientists, engineers. You can see them before and after, and that's you can see these. They're real case studies. I mean, people say it's on CGT and you can't trust it or whatever, but.
So did you say they became entrepreneurs?
Yeah,
that
some
sounds
people,
like
some. Yeah, well, maybe we should not be encouraging entrepreneurs.
No, of course, you know that they're going with the SOM, so they're actually needed to function until they reform back into a pure socialist economy.
Yeah, market socialism.
I kind of understand the strategy at the moment though. I'm glad that they're finally actually making the SOM socialist.
Yes.
because it was just straight up capitalism under Deng.
Yeah.
Now they're trying to make it humane, you know.
I mean, Deng's argument was so. Yeah, he proper benefited of the Sino-Soviet split. He was like, we're isolated from the Soviet Union, we're isolated from the United States, we need investment in our country. I know, we'll go to the United States. It's like you don't even try and repair his relationship with the Soviet Union. It's like, I know, we'll go to the US. If the Sino-Soviet split never happened, he would have never had the opportunity to rise in the party of that argument, and arguably there would have never been reform and opening up in China.
Yeah,
There would
no,
never be any Sino-American alliance.
probably not anyway. Probably it's hard to say. You know, these things are
Yeah,
extremely
obviously it's
complex.
alternate history.
Yeah.
Yeah, but there would
But
be
let's just
if
say there would have been a much better
if you had a
footing.
Soviet ally the whole time, they could be a lot more codependent on each other and never need. Well, we can't say never, but much less likely to need to go to the West. We could say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like,
But
I
anyway,
mean, it's kind of sad. Like as soon as Mao died, you know, as soon as the anchor was lifted, they just drifted straight off the
1978,
capitalism.
78 is like
78, I know. When did he die? 76, right?
76, yeah. But it was
So
late.
yeah,
It
so
was late
1978,
76.
Cultural Revolution's over. We have family contract, and then it just was downhill from there.
Oh my goodness. And it only took that long because there was that little bit of a power struggle with Huagua thing, and then
Oh yes,
he had to actually
Instant.
pull up some
Happened
charges
pretty
against
fast,
the Gang of Four and then throw him into jail, and then have some suspicious suicides in prison, and there you go, you're sorted. You're sorted. Right, anyway, got off track again, but people want to say CGTN is unreliable. Whereas if you want to say that, where are your numbers coming from? You've got your statistics that are rubber stamps by the Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation situated in Washington DC. I mean, like the foundation that counts Nazi Germans and Imperial Japanese, and actually even COVID deaths now as communism's death toll. I mean, they'd be counting the sparrows next as communism's death toll.
Well, I mean, the USSR was at war with Germany, and
Yeah.
it's probably their fault.
Don't worry, guys. The Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation is confident it's a genuine Chinese government document. They've analysed it and they're sure about these numbers. So don't worry, guys. I mean,
Take our word for it.
yeah.
They save you so much research.
Yeah, the exact same group of people that still use the debunked statistics from the Black Book of Communism about Mao's famine, yeah, and obviously Nazis who massacred
But
Jews
is it
and
really
Imperial Japanese
is it really debunked?
victims.
Is it really debunked if,
Is
if
it
no,
Well, the publishers
nobody
the
knows it's
publishers
debunked?
themselves admitted that the statistical method they used was completely flawed, and they would just sort of the publishers admitted that the author was so desperate to get to that 100 million statistic, they were definitely looking at increasing everywhere they could.
Like, no, of course, I know it's debunked, but my point is, like, once again, if the media doesn't mention it, if it's not in the mainstream consciousness, it's not
True.
really debunked then.
Very
Is it?
true,
People
very
see
true.
that in the source list, they're probably thinking it's a well-researched, well-reasoned, you know, book. And most people, of course, I think if you talk to any professor, they will tell you, like, of statistics or mathematics, they'll tell you most people are statistically illiterate.
This
Like,
is
straight
true.
up.
This is true.
People,
Yeah.
especially the same thing is done with studies among, you know, just to reach that middle echelon of semi-sentient, semi, you know, how do you describe,
Just
like,
to
I don't know,
find something you
just
can study.
your
Yeah.
average intelligence people, you know, they see a study and they just don't question it because, well, firstly, who has the time, and secondly, let's take some like genuine mathematical understanding and reasoning to be able to critically analyze how it was done, and
Yeah.
that's sorely lacking in society. I think it's still.
This is true.
I think it's probably. I
Yeah,
think the U.S. education system is deliberately
trying to stop
underfunded
people
and
from yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, it's true. Time is a point you made as well. Most people who quote the statistic will never even open the book. Never mind, try and verify the statistical methodology being used there. But to be honest with you, I probably would trust CGTN's interviews with people who are actually there with their family and can be shown to have gone through the whole system and the black book of communism. You can see how they've been given opportunity and then they've been integrated into society. We always have to question the sources and the bias here. So I mean, you can do like the group. What was it? The NED, National Endowment for Democracy. They get the guys who pay the Hong Kong protesters, and they also fund the World Uyghur Congress. So of course they're going to say it's 1 million people. I mean, even if you look at Hong Kong, which we're going to do another discussion show about, if the situation's so bad, why do you need to pay people to protest? Wouldn't they be spontaneously do? Anyway, that's another video. Yeah, but
Yes.
yeah, but it's that World Uyghur Congress. Their chairman, Omer, I think I might not be right, Omer Kanat, but he's the one who always quotes the Western media for statistic, and they always quote the World Uyghur Congress. So he's actually just like North Korea defectors, except the people were never even. You just can't falsify any of it. You could say whatever you want.
Except in their case, they're like they actually do have people from the DPRK giving testimonials.
Well, yeah, that's true.
It's a bit more brutal. Like they literally
So people who've never
genocide
even
them.
yeah people who've never even been to China before. Yeah. Yes, but if you can instill this baseline anti-China outlook, in the future confirmation bias will just do the rest. Like China will,
Well, yes, exactly.
It'll be a word that rolls off the tongue like fascism or Hitler. No one's going to go around saying they're a Nazi or a Hitler supporter because people don't think about what fascism is. Most people can't even define fascism. It's just they know it's bad, and it is bad. It's just a system that believes there's an inherent hierarchy in the world. That's pretty much all it boils down to.
Yeah,
but people just think fascism. You're a fascist. They'll say that without even knowing what the word means. So if you're a communist, if you support China, it's much the same thing. Anything positive about China will immediately be ruled out because it doesn't fit the worldview. So people, they don't want to question. They don't want to challenge their views. They'd much prefer consistency, and I just wish everyone watching, just don't be so gullible.
Yes, please, comrades, do not be fooled by the echo chamber. You know, one small, out there media source makes something up about China, and then it's a great opportunity for one news source to quote them, get on the sensationalism, get the views. Then the next company does that, and of course, all the while the capitalists are encouraging this. And then they goes to the next media source, they quote the previous media source, and before you know it, you can never trace anything back to a legit source ever. You can never even know that it originally came from a fake one, just because there's so many media companies, all run by capitalists, all bouncing stuff around.
And everyone's saying it, right? So it must be true.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, it's just so audacious that America can create her own network of Chinese human rights defenders and start passing legislation in Congress. What was it? The Uyghur, I don't know what it's called, Uyghur Acts or something. It's they have some sort of authority to declare it's a human rights crisis, and the people who did that was a US group. They act like they own China. They can write the laws for China.
Well, I think they own the world, honestly.
Oh, it's true, yeah. Oh.
Yes, so.
Good day, Benson Young.
Hey, Comrade Benson, welcome.
Comrade Benson, welcome.
Hello.
Good day. Welcome today. We're discussing Xinjiang today. Hello? Alright, I guess he's just going to listen, so...
where were we?
They treat these facilities like they're some sort of Nazi camp when you can see videos on phones, and the fact that they have phones shows you what it's like, but phones from inside, it shows them to be pretty much nothing more than boarding schools, because you can see people who've actually recorded the classes on their phones.
You know what'd be funny?
So it's not even like it's a Chinese news network, it's on someone's phone.
You know, with our coming Patreon thing and all that.
Yes.
You know what'd be funny? We could post as a joke, uncovering. Just find like the most benign capitalist country you can think of, and make something like uncovering the, like the social ills of the mass genocide or something.
The New
And then
Zealand
just take some
genocide.
buildings that look kind of dodgy, you know,
Got
take
a
some
dodgy warehouse.
take some rundown parts of town, you know, say that's the ghetto everyone gets shoved into, you know, like.
Alright.
I mean, maybe the humor will be lost because we don't have a massive news network to just keep echoing it for us. But you know, it'd be a funny stab at
It
the
would,
companies.
it would, yeah. But yeah, it's true. Anyone can just play some B-roll footage and narrate any story if you want over it. I mean, the California clowns, as I like to call them, you know, Lawa 86 and Serpent ZA, they're experts at this. I mean, since they've left China now, because they're still the authority on China in the West and on YouTube. And all they ever do is they have B-roll footage of like some Chinese subway or something, or like some Chinese street, and then they just
they're
talk.
experts.
Yeah, and then they just sit there in California and talk about everything that's supposedly happening in China. Oh my god! Oh, I watch their streams just for the. They're just not even in China anymore. They just sit there live streaming in California with the B-roll footage. It's like a comedy show. It really is.
Yeah, it's
I just can't.
It's a dark comedy show. It's a dark comedy show.
To read the comments though, because people just believe it so much. But
and actually, an important point I really want to make. I just remembered it.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So they use this media to distract people, right? And
Yep.
stuff, like, as we said, you know, we've gone over this, I think, a number of times now. But we know from recent history, that when that does fail, the US will use force.
Oh, yes.
And they will behave just as brutally as any tyrannical regime might. It's just, you know, that's the last, you know, there are many lines of defense we can say. So when it came to so firstly, when I think it was like HBC, possibly. I was watching a Vietnam War documentary, but anyway, someone on HBC, you know, recorded the U.S. soldiers burning down some villages,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it was really a sad thing because these farmers had worked their whole lives, and you know, I guess that's pretty much how they all joined the NLF of Vietnam. But anyway, so they were burning it down. Literally, when they aired that, they got a call directly from the White House, from the president, and he said something to the effect of, you know, get on our effing team right now, then slam the phone down. And then, you know, later on when the anti-war protests happened, there was just a shooting of the peaceful protest. The army came up, the military police, they just shot them all.
This
Like,
is
so
the thing.
people talk about Tiananmen Square.
Yeah,
like with
Tiananmen Square.
no real pictures except one guy in front of a tank.
Yeah, if it was America, the tank, not even a tank, the police car would have just run over the guy. They wouldn't have just stood and waited there. I mean, there were so many casualties of actually Chinese soldiers who were hit and burnt by those protesters. I think Hong Kong protesters really helped me to really look at Tiananmen Square protests in a new light, because by the time any tanks were rolling in, the peaceful protesters were gone. And just the way that the US can support these protesters in China and in Hong Kong, which is in China, as these brave freedom fighters, and then when people do pretty much similar things in their own country, like looting, smashing stuff up, setting stuff on fire, then in like 3 days they're rolling the army in. It's like, if this was happening in China, you'd be calling it a massacre. It's just the double standard.
And you know how the media would make it explode too.
Yeah, they
would be so exaggerated,
yeah.
even if
it's terrorist when they do it
like
in America, and freedom fighters when they do it in China.
They can exaggerate things that just straight up don't happen.
Yeah.
Over time, as they get echoed around, like you know how gossip gets blown up in a high school. You know, if people were actually killed, it's a complete duality, because you know, these protesters, they're committing acts of terrorism because, you know, they're freedom fighters. They're going against an oppressive regime, when really all they're doing is violating the democracy that the country's established.
And
the will of the people.
Destroying their own infrastructure, like public transport and train stations and ramps for disabled people. I mean, I saw one of them. They were holding flags saying, "President Trump, please come liberate Hong Kong." Could you imagine it if in the United States, American protesters were holding signs and Chinese flags
Say, China,
and saying,
please come in and liberate
Chairman Xi,
Washington.
please come and liberate, I don't know, California or something. Can you imagine it? They'd be saying, oh yeah, these are obviously Chinese back groups. It's just,
Honestly, I wish it were just as easy as to establish communism as the. I mean, as much as I criticize Trotsky, I just wish it were, like in the ideal world. Wouldn't it be great if there could just be one
global
permanent revolution?
spontaneous
All the
permanent
workers just
revolution?
sweep through the different. Yeah. All the workers just sweep through the different countries, and everything just collapses all at once, and you get world communism like that. Wouldn't that just be the world? Wouldn't that just be the ideal world?
Instead, you just go to Mexico for a while and end up with an ice pick in the back of your head.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with these camps, like the majority of people who would go, they'd pick up a skill too. They'd complete their training and they'd go home, and then most people would be out within matters of months. So the Chinese Communist Party, they couldn't care less about what your religion is, and the only time they intervene is it's when it impacts the health or safety of other people. So
yes, exactly. They don't care about your religion. But they care about the integrity of their society and the social harmony.
That's why there's so many Muslims in China, which the state takes no issue with. And if you go to Xinjiang, most of the Communist Party officials there in the local government, they are Muslims. But if you're a law-abiding Chinese citizens, you're not going to impact the education
and
or the
even
health
that,
of
it just shows how open they are to religion, because technically, they push for having the party as an atheist party, right?
Well,
Like
they say the reason they have the atheist thing is they said at least secular or non-believing in the party itself, because it ensured they couldn't be biased, that people would treat every religion underneath it as an equal. But I have seen increasingly pushing now. I do believe that was only actually introduced quite lately. Maybe I think in the 90s actually they introduced that.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Huh.
It's when they were having their reassessment of what dialectical. When they denounced the Cultural Revolution, they said it went against Marxist philosophy. They had this whole redefining of what Marxist philosophy was, and I think that's when that came in. But there have been actually a lot of voices in the party now, asking for official allowance. But if you go to a local area like that, they will just literally let Muslims join the party, and there are a lot of party members who they're not trying to push their faith in government policy or anything like that, and there's documented they're practicing Catholics in the party. So I mean,
as we know from proof,
that guy who emailed me, he's bless him, he's still in schism. He's a Anglo-Catholic, but he believes in Catholicism.
Yes.
He believes in the Holy Catholic Apostolic Church, and he is a CCP member. So long as he's not trying to push his view in the party. There are actually a lot of people.
They don't want it to be like a Christian party or something.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want you to show any favour to one religious group underneath that you're dealing with. But and especially if you practice like a Chinese traditional, or if you just believe in Confucian morals or Taoism or even Buddhism, something like that, they really could not care less.
Yeah, they're not going to go I think they probably just the way they would use it as a pretext if you were to do something like to violate the party line on some religion or something.
Yeah, if you started doing some religious some radical religious policy in the party, you could use it as a pretext. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like drinking in Mexico, like at the age of 16.
Yeah.
Technically, it's 18, but you'll never, even if you do it right next to a police officer, or I'm not sure how it is these days, but anyway, I know when I went there, like even if the police officer went by or something,
yeah,
you weren't gonna even get reprimanded. Like, it's just there. If someone gets drunk, if they start, it's like that. If someone does cause a problem for that reason, then they have a pretext to take you into the station and. Because they have to have due process and they have to have proper legal justification. It's like that. It's to give them an out if there is a problem. But otherwise, for the sake of people's well-being, they're not going to be draconian about it.
Yeah. So the CCP couldn't really care less if you're a citizen, or even if you are a government official. If you're a Muslim, what they have got a problem with is subversion and criminal acts like brainwashing people or
And factionalism.
inducting
Religious
children.
factionalism.
Factionalism, teaching children extremist thoughts, inciting hatred between different ethnic groups, and launching violent terrorist attacks. I mean, that's what they've got an issue with. But I think another thing we should bear in mind is the TIP, which is the East Turkmenistani Independence Party. It was actually it was classed by the United States as part of the global terrorism network, and it was actually not only a threat to China but all the world. But this was as late as 2003. The US itself labelled this East Turkestani independence movement as a terrorist organisation, and now apparently they're all for it. I mean, the US could not care any less about Muslims or Uyghurs. I mean, they bomb Muslims to bits in other parts of the world every week. They just want to they want to utilise a movement that's useful to them at a time. But even these Uyghur activists, they don't realise that their interests will only be aligned for a certain time until that utility runs out, and then the US will just discard them, like Tibet.
Like Kampuchea,
Yeah.
for example. You see, they're even willing to support some. I wouldn't say they're communists, but like some peasantists. They're definitely not in favor of
US
capitalism.
capital, yeah.
They'll finance Pol Pot. It's like the most radical. If it will cause trouble for the Vietnamese, it's just disgusting. There's no conscience for these U.S. leaders at all. They have no conscience. They're just imperialists are truly dogs, and that's why they're always called in propagandas dogs. And this
G-Cheat, so-called,
they earn those names. They earn
dogs.
names.
Yeah.
They earn their nicknames.
Yeah.
Very
So,
much.
yeah.
Yes.
So, Xinjiang's issues...
I think that if you look at the way they lie about China in the news, this CTGN, sure, and CCTV, sure, they have their criticism of the U.S., but they're never making stuff up or
that's
ridiculous.
That's a good point, actually. Just as you can actually, a lot of pro-China people post very anti-US stuff on Chinese media, and so often the Chinese censors will actually delete it as being too inflammatory towards the US. So it's like they're still defending the US. There was like a hit article on the New York Times, an expose that was posted on Weibo, and it was deleted because it was too offensive towards the Americans. So they'll actually defend both sides. They'll defend they'll defend people. They defend people. They'll also ban things who put offensive comments about Muslims or. So they just don't want to disrupt the harmony more than any censoring any political line.
And it shows the Chinese are the bigger people here.
Yeah.
The socialists are always peace-loving, and it's always the capitalist imperialists who are causing the wars. So it's always been that way. Even with as far back as, obvious incidents that come to mind, like the Cuban missile crisis, for example.
Yeah.
That was right after the U.S. put missiles in Turkey, but they never want to eat their own medicine. It's always okay if wars and atrocities happen in other countries. But if anything even remotely comes close to threatening their dominance, not even in their own country, but elsewhere, their influence, it's a terrible evil for them.
Yeah. You wonder where the censorship really is, because I think there was a discussion that, I don't know who it was, I'll put it up on the screen again, that people were having on Twitter. I think it was about Israel and Palestine. A load of the posts were getting deleted by Twitter. So they actually moved over to Weibo to have the discussion, which is like, I guess, Chinese Facebook, to have the discussion, and they could discuss it freely on Weibo, whereas they couldn't on Twitter. So I mean, we even see that on YouTube. YouTube will delete, as I was telling you earlier, comments before even showing it to the owner of the channel. You'll get
I think we have to move off YouTube.
You get the notification that the comment's there when you click onto it. It's gone. even if we're uploading parallel to YouTube, because I understand people use YouTube for almost all of the media, so they might still be able to see our videos, but if people want a place freely to comment where nothing's going to get deleted, maybe we should upload every video parallel to our website or something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, you know how our website now has a comment section?
Yeah,
right?
and if we uploaded...
Maybe I think we should probably keep this in the video too, because this might be useful to
Certainly,
people.
yeah. If we uploaded every video as a post, if you look at each post, each article, that actually has a comment section itself. So if we uploaded each video as like a post like that, they'd all have an individual comment section aside from the chat room.
Yes, this is...
Even as a like feature.
Exactly, yes.
So definitely we should start running it parallel to the channel, at least for all future uploads. Yeah.
Absolutely, because I'm not even... Like, the YouTube is huge. They have so many technical employees, and they do have a strong ideological line. And of course,
yes.
they are themselves probably the most powerful bourgeois information institution out there now.
Google,
So
yes.
they're increasingly... It's been happening for years and years and years. They've been pushing all of this dumb crap like nail polish and stuff, and shoving it to the bottom, into the dirt, anything that is, even videos about World War II.
Yeah.
And stuff.
You watch YouTube now, and what they promote is basically just mainstream television program. But even if you go on Google, and you trying to search like Tiananmen Square, even just Tiananmen, you always get pictures of the massacre. Whereas if you went on DuckDuckGo, you wouldn't. Or if I forget the name of the documentary, but there's a specific documentary that was made that was to try and show the other side of the Tiananmen Square incident, of like all the soldiers who got attacked, and to try and show these protesters weren't actually good people. But if you searched it, there's one day you could search it and it was at the top of Google, but then ever since it's nowhere to be seen on Google. Whereas if you just use another neutral search engine like DuckDuckGo, for example, you'll still see it at the top. If you use Baidu, you'll see it at the top. So it's they've pruned search results, and people don't realise it.
This is what you do notice too.
Yeah, and that's even what you notice.
So detailed and comprehensive with their social engineering.
And no one knows that censorship's happening. They just think they're searching Google, right? They're seeing what's there.
And it's way more than what happens in China. Way more. Google does.
Yeah.
Way more.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
They have algorithms automatically, like, and a lot of stuff that's just normal gets censored too, but then they refine it more, you know.
Yeah.
But it's so insidious.
And the worst part is...
I really hope someday that they... Well, anyway, I won't say this because it's for YouTube.
Yeah, but if you say things like this, people think you're like a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. The saddest part is people think they can just search freely and everything they're getting a balanced two-sided argument, and it's so clever how they frame the same side of the story to look like two different sides, and people think they're looking at both sides of the story and creating their own opinion, where it's like you can choose from option A or option B, but they all uphold option C. There's bipartisan issues. It's just semantics, really.
And also, if I might just break the fourth wall for the comrades, have another meta moment here.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Comrades watching this, you don't... If you really want to know something, if you're going to use a search engine, don't use Google. Use DuckDuckGo or Baidu or something to get the other side.
Baidu's actually pretty good. I always use Baidu now. You can actually counter to what you might think. You can get on Baidu, if you search it, you get YouTube videos. You get links to Wikipedia.
Oh. You know what? Okay, I'm gonna actually make that my homepage now. One second.
Yeah,
I'm done. After this conversation, it's just reminded me of how shitty it's getting, and it's only gonna get worse, of course. So I'm going to make this my homepage on Google Chrome.
Hey.
Selling me the tool with which I will remove them from my research process.
Just wait until Huawei's Harmony operating system comes out. We won't have to use Apple or Android for it.
Yeah, although I gotta say, Windows is pretty good. I'm not gonna switch from Windows.
Yeah, Windows is nice. But
Microsoft... They actually like, what room do you have for ideological stuff in an operating system? For goodness sake?
Yeah.
It's just a technical thing. It's very good. Like, very effective.
It's nice. Yeah. Anyway,
Alrighty.
but
So
well, I guess what's Xinjiang's issues? They're not a matter of ethnicity. They're not a matter of religion or human rights. In essence, it's a matter of fighting terrorism and separatism, which we should all be able to get behind. And any attempts by Western politicians to smear and discredit Xinjiang's anti-terrorism and de-radicalisation movement is just the height of irony. When in Western countries, what would they do? These issues with integration and employment and of terrorism, they go unsolved for years. I mean, even Asian communities in the UK, they're not integrated. They still, they might come to the same schools, but they live in their isolated communities. There's not been proper integration with the whole nation. And in China, they just don't tolerate these things. They won't tolerate separatism or ghettos or unemployment. They'll find a way
and
to
remember,
fix it.
why don't they tolerate it? How do they decide? Well, through the People's Consultative Congress, through the
Yeah.
Communist Party that basically every possible fraction of society is in some degree.
Yeah, and the thing is, people say, well, it's one party, you don't get a say, but what you're having a say over, what they're doing the votes and polls over, is actually policy. Do you like this policy? Do you have any suggestions? Do you have any complaints?
Yes.
What's been happening in your local region? They have officers who will go around to people to sort out disputes and stuff. It's the focus shifts from who we're going to elect for the next 4 years to what policies are we going to implement for the next 40 years.
Yes, exactly.
So,
Exactly. It's long term, and you know what? I gotta say, I'm. At one hand, I really, really feel bad for how the Americans now, with their GDP drop and everything, are gonna be faring. There are good people there, like
yeah,
in every country,
of course, yeah.
who just want to get by. But at the same time, for the long term, I'm happy that this COVID thing has just shown the holes in their
Oh, yeah.
ultra-individualist,
It's
ultra-capitalist
really
society.
shown the holes of the two-party system of not being able to get things done, and shown the strength of China's one-party system and swiftly being able to get things done. I mean,
And technically, it's not even one party either. They, they
there's nine
cooperate.
parties, but a democratic centralist system, right? Because
Yeah, yeah.
in the first week, they were doing contract tracing, wearing masks, locking down cities, and health verification on the app to go into places. In the UK, it's what August now. We're only just starting having a contact tracing app where it's only just been made mandatory like last month to wear masks in shops and in public places, and outside people on streets people still don't wear masks. China had this done in the first 2 weeks. It's just
And people
all the debating
to
and
protect their sense of to just protect their feelings and their sense of individualism.
yeah. Oh,
I've seen people wear masks with holes in them. They're not really masks.
people wear
Just to
'em
protest.
just yeah. Yeah, and we don't. The education here is so bad as well. People just wear them. They'll wear them over their mouth, but not their nose, and then people wear them back to front, and then you just see some people just walking around with it on their chin, and no one's enforcing it. No one's stopping them. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, can I say
We've really
America?
seen the failings of
They
the
they have
two-party system.
they've hung themselves.
Yeah,
They hung
because they've
themselves.
made it perfectly clear now.
They poorly educated their people. The bourgeois elite made sure they have poor education.
Yeah,
They made sure that their country, you know, had many people living in poverty,
I mean,
and
yeah,
they made sure to encourage individualism and to fracture the population as much as possible, and to have a fractional democracy where everyone's fighting against each other for their idea instead of cooperating to make the best solution for all. And guess what's happened? They have the wages of their decision has now been paid. Their economy has shrunk by 33%,
nice.
just raw GDP.
Oh dear.
And 42%, and that's the average, 42% in investment. So no new businesses are opening up, at least not significantly as before. I mean, that's a massive drop. I think in the Great Depression, it was 15 or 20% GDP drop. I mean, no,
Yeah,
it's not the only indicator.
yeah, it's not the only one, but that is huge. Yeah.
Literally unprecedented. And the unemployment rate also is. It's just, So not only this is not just like 2008, just a balance sheet recession, where some stocks go down, which doesn't really mean much. This is like real economic decline.
People are out of job. Yeah.
Yeah, like the productive capacity, their potential
But
is being reduced.
China had the ability to just say, "All right, rent's cancelled on houses and on businesses." It's just something that things that could never happen in the US, and or they actually had people weren't furloughed. They said you must pay your workers full wages during this time. It's just, I mean,
And if there were ever a problem, they could deal with it
yeah.
in detail.
And people had
they don't
food
have
brought to them. They weren't having to think, how am I gonna afford food? The government would bring people food for free.
Well, because ultimately, what does this money, what does this economy represent? It's just a bunch of goods being allocated.
Yeah,
It's
so
just this
if you
problem
could
of scarcity.
allocate, yeah.
Like, sure, it can hide behind it. In capitalism, the real problems can hide behind stock prices and can hide behind labor costs and all this. But really, if you want to give people food, you can give people
You
food
can
if
just
you
give people food.
indicatively plan right. And even though the Communist Party of China doesn't implement a central economic plan anymore to plan all of the transactions in the economy, they do have, because they have democratic centralism, they can in detail make indicative planning policies that might seem counterintuitive but are very helpful. And they can give
Yeah,
food to whoever they want,
because
housing to whoever they want.
because at the end of the day, they're still not run for profit as being the primary motivation. So they can do things like that,
Exactly.
which would just never be feasible to be done in the West. It'd be just so unprofitable. It might seem counterintuitive, but it serves people's need. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
I mean,
And in the U.S., if you were going to cancel rents, well, there goes your
oh
political
my
support
goodness,
pretty
yeah.
fast.
Oh my goodness
Yeah.
me, yeah. Yeah. I mean, if
Like every single thing they do is under scrutiny in itself, right? They can
exactly,
never have an overall like strategy.
yeah. I mean, if you want to talk about the inefficiency of the two-party system, ooh, just I think I might cut out there. Oh,
Logan, you're back.
hello.
Jeez,
I think I'm back. Yeah.
these things in.
Let me just check it's recording. Yes,
Yes.
it is still recording. Good, good,
But
good.
good heavens, this
Right,
has been a
I'll
long
just
conversation. I think we should split this up between multiple videos.
here. I'll just sync up the audio again. Okay.
And also, if there's
So
any background noise, I do cut it out, please.
I'll do my best. So okay. So I was talking about inefficiency of the two-party system. Like a good practical example is in the UK we've been talking about building a high-speed rail for between London and Manchester for 10 years now, and we still not really. Oh, welcome, comrade.
Hey, Comrade GP, welcome.
Hey.
We
Hello.
we we are talking about Xinjiang today, but
But it's
we've
gone
just
on
got
multiple topics.
it's gone on to multiple topics. We're just
As
talking
any
about the
good discussion does.
inefficiency of the two-party system at the moment. But we've been talking about building this railway line for 10 years and we've not laid any of it yet. Whereas in China they build hundreds of miles of railway line every year. I mean, in the UK we've only managed, there's that much back and forth. We've only managed to build an underground system in one city. The inefficiency is staggering.
Yes, and for example, another example in my mind, even on the local level, this is a problem. I know in Vancouver, the Lionsgate Bridge, for example, you know, the semi, like, they're not really socialist, but, you know, you're more left-wing part. Like, Canada's a bit better than the US. It's not so totalitarian. There's a little bit more social consciousness. Let's just say capitalism is a little bit behind in Canada from where it has developed in the US. Its point of development is behind, I would say. It hasn't consumed as much from an all-controlling force.
Comrade GP, is there some noise coming in on your end?
Oh yeah.
I could enable in the chat this there's like a noise cancelling feature for background noise.
Ah.
Oh, alright, I'll do that.
Or wait, never mind.
Where?
It doesn't seem to be possible here.
Is that? I think I selected it.
That sounds good. Yeah. Oh.
Alright.
Anyway, please continue,
Yeah,
Premier.
Yeah, so as I was saying, you know, the NDP was in power then. You know, I commend the dedication to the workers, but they are totally inept. I'm just going to be honest. Even as a hardcore, like, steadfast communist, guys do not understand how an economy works. Or how to... They're just... You know, they get in with their political rhetoric. It's all well and good, but the stuff they do harms everyone, even the workers.
Yeah.
So anyway, so they were... So, for example, even on the local level, right? Not even in these big government elections, there's this problem. So we were building this Lionsgate Bridge. There's a simple piece of infrastructure to connect the main part of the city with this kind of suburban area on the coast. It's like literally, so, or rather it was already there, but it had 2 lanes. So they were going to expand the infrastructure, right? But because of a whole bunch of political like conflict between certain elements of the native population and the NDP and the liberals, it was a mess, and it ended with, of course, more money being spent on making the bridge 3 lanes. You got me right, 3 lanes, upgrading the bridge to be 3 lanes. They did that basically by narrowing the other 2 lanes, and I know it's ridiculous, right? Like this stuff, but this is like it happens everywhere. So they spent more money than to just build a new bridge, literally a new like 6-lane bridge. They spent more money on upgrading an antiquated bridge from the 30s from with an extra like lane. It's just so just imagine this over and over again throughout society. That is the inefficiency of our system. It leads to suboptimal solutions for society, for everyone.
So I think, with this in mind, I think we have to have an open mind and just be willing to get rid of our preconceived notions and look at things more objectively. I mean, I actually used to fall for a lot of the nonsense. Even 2 or 3 years ago, I actually still opposed Chairman Xi Jinping and the Chinese government today. I just thought they were corrupt, revisionist. I believed everything about them violating human rights, everything. But I really think they're doing a lot of good today, and they're certainly opposing the US, and I'd say China's revival. They're definitely harkening back to Mao Zedong. There's a lot more pictures of Chairman Mao. There's been amazing the decrease in corruption, tax billionaires, and there's been so much to alleviate poverty. And maybe that's because of Xi's experience to sent down youth. He knows the rural countryside. He saw what the conditions the peasants were living in, and wanted to alleviate poverty. But I really do hope China can come fully back to socialism again, as in Mao's time. I mean, we see these core socialist values and freedom, democracy, rule of law, justice. And if you talk to people who actually live in China, and I think learning Chinese has helped me do this a bit more. I used to say to them that modern China was a bad place, but time and time again they'd show me where I was deceived, where I was misled, and because you have that a bit of that language, it helps you easy to look at the side, because if you're an English speaker, you're going to look at English media, everything's in English, and it's easy just to get one side of the story. But I had to reassess my own view of China and Xi Jinping and admit that I was wrong. And it takes a lot to go against everything that you've been told in the West, but I just had to if I was to be intellectually honest. So I really do encourage a lot of comrades listening to try and at least do the same thing. I mean, China's just against extremists. It's not a prison camp. For extremists, anyone can be a target. There's been imams stabbed on the way to mosque, for goodness sake. I mean, it's just about the safety of the Chinese people and Uyghur and Han social harmony. That's what I'll say. And any Muslims watching, these separatists, they're not people, they're not Muslims that like we know who you want to be friends with. You don't want to be associated with them. You really don't. But there's just so much propaganda and rumours. I just want everyone to try and at least have an open mind and not just believe the first thing you hear.
Yeah, I agree with the chairman. When you're dealing with terrorists, Muslims, they're like the way they're Muslims in the way that the Ku Klux Klan is Christian.
Yeah,
Like,
they are not your oppressed brothers that you want to be standing up for.
Yeah. There's
Yeah.
actually some groups in Xinjiang, I can't really pronounce it very well, are actually backed by Al Qaeda even.
So with that, comrades, should we try and wrap it up for
yes,
tonight?
it's been a very
It's been a
long
long
but
one.
good discussion. Yes.
It's been a
And
productive, yeah.
also, the
And
YouTube algorithm looks favorable on splitting things up into 10-minute chunks. No doubt it's part of social engineering, probably to make things simpler. But we have a long discussion. We just,
I'm attention spans.
yeah, if we split it up, it's always a good idea to do.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a nice timestamp feature now where you can actually, if you put timestamps into descriptions of videos, you can scrub between different sections in the
Yes,
video. I think it's called
I do
chapters.
like that. Yeah, I like
Yeah,
that feature. It
it's
really
nice.
helps with
So perhaps we could split it up in a topic like that.
Yes, I like that also when people post albums on YouTube when that feature works. That's
Yes,
really
yeah.
nice.
Oh yeah, the
Yeah.
timestamp thing.
So let's see. So we've done. Let's look at the list of topics. We've done Trent Horn misunderstands socialism. We've done Xinjiang and the Uyghurs. So the next MCP discussion show will be Hong Kong writers and the hypocrisy of the US. And after that, we're going to go into
We
some
did already cover that,
historical
didn't
ones
we?
like Great Leap Forward and the Cultural Revolution. We touched it a bit, but there's so much detail we can
That's
cover.
true, yes.
So looking forward to
Yes.
that.
Well,
So well, thank you everyone for joining us today.
yes, thanks for watching.
And we definitely need to keep more of these, well, not face to face, but more human interactions coming along.
Yeah, and thankfully next time we do this, one of my siblings will not take a deuce on the floor, so we should be good then.
Yeah, let's hope so. Let's hope so.
Yeah, that was
But yeah, it
something.
seems like we've got good time. That works now.
Yep.
Well, good day and Godspeed, comrades. Have a
Yeah,
good
good day. God bless you. May the blessed Mother intercede for you, comrade. See ya. 再见。
角落里努力，起来，全世界受苦的人，顽强的热血已经沸腾，要为真理而斗争。旧世界那个落花流水，奴役们起来，起来！不要说我们一无所有，我们要做天下的主人。这是最后的斗争，团结起来到明天。Internationale就一定要实现，这是最后的斗争，团结起来到明天。Internationale就一定要实现。